everyone, and welcome to Spotlight On, the artist interview podcast brought to you by the Little Yellow Building in Brookhaven, Mississippi. I'm your host, Derek Covington-Smith, and join us as I get to talk with a different creative each week. We learn about their lives and their stories and what they're doing in Mississippi today. So come along and join us, and let's get into another interview.
Yay!
Hey everyone, and welcome back to Spotlight On. Thank you for joining us again this week. We have a special guest, and I have some slight ulterior motives that you're going to find out later. But we have visual artist, performance artist, sculptor, educator, Kristen Tordella-Williams. Welcome to the podcast. Thank you so much for being with us, and thank you for taking the time out for these different projects that we're going to talk about.
Thank you so much for inviting me, Derek. I'm so happy to be here.
Yay. So to jump in, why don't you tell us a little bit about your background in art and maybe growing up in art?
Yeah, I love that you say that phrase, growing up in art. And that's one thing I just appreciate about Mississippians. It's not like you're a fully fledged human, you're always growing. So I grew up in Massachusetts, and while my family wasn't a big, go to arts museums or arts events family, we were very creative and hardworking. I didn't really have cable growing up. I read a lot of books. I spent a lot of time kind of in the woods near my house, and my family really valued, that hard work ethic and education. So I'm very fortunate. I have a bachelor's degree from the University of Massachusetts, Dartmouth, in sculpture. And when I went to school, my parents, they were kind of like, oh, you want to go to school for art? That's interesting. And I was like, yeah, that's what I like doing, in high school. I liked English classes, but I tried to always load my schedule with arts classes, including the orchestra and then visual arts classes as well. And I was really lucky to go to a great high school that really encouraged me. In fact, my high school photo teacher, we had the dark room, it was always so much fun because you could walk around and take photos during class. I just absolutely loved it. I love the dark room process. And then my teacher recommended that I go to UMass Dartmouth, and she was a really big supporter of me. And so I just love teachers. I just can't say enough for all those mentors who helped me get here. And then I went to UMass, and I was kind of graduating. I was like, what do I want to do? Oh my gosh, I just want to make art. I want to keep making art. How can I keep making art? And I had applied to a couple of grad schools just to see what would happen. Because I was like, oh, I don't have a studio. I don't have enough money to start a studio. And I don't really know what I'm doing. So I had gained a lot of really valuable experience about making art, but then, you need those tools in order to continue making art, and you need space. So I got in by the skin of my teeth to Alfred University. Some people dropped out, and I was kind of high enough on the wait list, even though I actually got a rejection letter after they called me, and then she's like, you're going to get a rejection letter. Don't worry about it. You're getting in. And I was like, oh my God. So it just goes to show you should always apply. You should always apply, because you never know what's going to happen. And that totally changed kind of the next phase of my career. Cause I thought, the reason why I wanted to apply to grad school is not just for the studios and the critique and the feedback and the community, but also because I knew I wanted to be a professor. So I went to grad school. I graduated. I busted butt because I was the youngest one, and I felt like I had a lot to prove. So I really just tried to put myself out there. I did a lot of performance artwork there. My undergrad show, BFA show, was a lot of welded steel and lit sculptures. Like the kids say, they were lit, yo. They're on fire. I'm sorry. Don't kids. I'm not old. Anyway. And then I learned how to make paper from a studio mate. And so then in grad school, I was continuing to make paper. I was making prints. I was doing performance art. I was making sculpture. Is just multidisciplinary. I really loved that program because it supported me in that. Yeah. So I'm really grateful to my education, because that really helped. It fertilized my seed to help me grow. And
kidding. Wow. Just the amount of exposure of things you got to go through right there.
Yeah, very lucky. 6 years of education in a row. And I actually joke like I've been in school my whole life, because then immediately after that, I stayed at Alfred for a year. I taught performance art. I taught drawing. I taught sculpture as an adjunct sabbatical replacement. I also was a TA for an art history class, which helped me really gain a lot of information about criticism in art. Because like I am creative, I'm a hard worker, I have an imagination, but I think I felt a lot throughout my art education, like a little bit of imposter syndrome. You wouldn't, right? Because I didn't, there's all these words and this language in the art world. And I was like, what does this even mean? And it turns out it's tied to a history of philosophical critique, that you need to have some access to that vocabulary in order to understand. You need to do a lot of reading, and I'm still doing a lot of reading. Like, so that all kind of like stewed up in there. And then I met my now husband and I moved to Ithaca, and I got a 1 semester gig teaching at SUNY Cortland in the middle of the snow and the cold. And through my graduate mentor, I had applied for a different job. I was applying for a different job, and I was like, Joe, can you write me a letter? I really want this like post MFA thing. And he was like, oh, I didn't know you were looking. I thought you had a job. I was like, no, I do not have a job, Joe. Help me. And he had mentored Sandra Murchison, who also went to Alfred 20 years ago. And she was a professor at Millsaps at the time, and they were hiring for my position, and they were still looking. They were about to like have a failed search because they couldn't find somebody who had like a diverse enough set of skills and interests for a small school. Like, you know, there's 2 of us here of studio art faculty at Millsaps, and we had to do a lot, you know, and we had to be willing to be very flexible and be able to cover a lot for our students. And so I got hired and I moved to Jackson in 2013. Oh my God. And it's been 8 years. Derek, 8 years.
Yeah. Welcome. Thank
you. And, you know, as kind of like part of my growth as an artist, I think that I have grown so much, and I have Mississippi to be grateful to for that, because I was challenged in so many ways. I'm a upper middle class, privileged white girl, right? And while I've experienced sexism, I had never really witnessed so much institutional racism in my entire life until I moved to Mississippi. And then it made me really angry, because Mississippi is a freaking state. It is part of the states. It is part of the United States. And to constantly denigrate, use that word for a reason, right? Denigrate Mississippians because of this. And then to see all of the institutional failures that have led to this point. I'm very interested in history. I'm a history nerd. So like, I educated myself about Mississippi history, and Millsaps helped me in that as well, through the lectures and the programming here, just going to things and then like writing down books that people recommend and talking about it with people in Mississippi, because we actually talk about race, I think, here, even though it can be really weird that the woman in the post office in front of you has just got something to say, and she's, and then now I'm like part of that conversation. Like yeah, it really has helped shape me as an adult artist, as an adult human being, as a professor, because you also have these conversations in the classroom, and you need to be equipped. It's you can't, you know, in the readings and you don't want to leave your student hanging, because sometimes like I've seen this shift since I got here. I had predominantly white classrooms. Now they're more diverse, actually pretty evenly. And like last semester I taught a predominantly Black classroom for the first time, I think, ever my teaching career. And it like wasn't a big deal in the moment, but then I like look back and I was like, that's so cool. Like, look at what a big shift that is. And that shows that like change is possible, and even in a short amount of time. So it was really fun. And like giving my students free reign to like express themselves, and you have those conversations naturally. Cause like, you know, young Mississippians, they're going to be kind of, I don't know how to put it. They're also like, especially through their education, they have that discovery and that awakening, woke culture, right? That's why it's called that, because you awaken to these historical inaccuracies that you've been told your whole life about America, and then you're like awakened to it. Even this is for Black students and white students and immigrants, right? Like whoever, you're awakened to these complexities, and then it's like, oh shit, what the fuck do I do? Right. And like, how do I move through the world now that I'm armed with this knowledge? And it can be really daunting. So like having those conversations in the classroom can be so transformative. And I think that's why the pandemic has been especially challenging. I've been missing those conversations like in critique and in discussion, where you can have that and not, I think this semester's gotten a lot better. But anyway, that's the short, I think, version of my story.
Well, I know you do, like you said, ton of research, ton of reading. For anybody, any art teacher or anybody that teaches in a classroom that is maybe listening, what kind of, I'm about to ask you for a recommendation for anything that they might be able to read to get more of a grasp on this subject matter, because it is important. It's very important.
Important. And if you were not kind of motivated to do some of this work on your own from last summer, and I don't know what will motivate you, but I hope that my white ass will.
Hopefully.
In terms of Mississippi teachers, you all need to read Mississippi Conflict and Change. It's a history textbook. It's written for middle schoolers, but it really is a comprehensive book that was written and researched by Millsap's professor and Millsap students. And it was counter to the textbook that was in schools in the 80s. This is in the 80s when they wrote it, in like early 90s, I want to say. And I read that, and it's pretty, like, it's like very kind of factual. So I don't know. I think that's a great book to read, just to have like that kind of basis of like, what is this place and who lived here before white people and the slaves that they brought. Anyway, what else? I would highly recommend Bell Hooks, and because she writes a lot about the South, and then the other person that I'm looking at my bookshelf, there's also Rebecca Solnit, in terms of feminist writers about art and culture. I think she's written so much, and my students loved the excerpt of Men Explain Things to Me that I brought into class a couple years ago. And then the last person that I would highly, highly recommend that you follow would be Kiese, Laymon. And if you are in Mississippi, you must read heavy. There is no two ways about it. You have to read heavy. And that actually leads me to another author, Jesmyn Ward, who's another Mississippi author. And I know it's fiction, but like, reading fiction helps promote empathy. And if you read this book, you'll start to feel empathetic for perspectives that are other than yours. So Kiese, Laymon, love his perspective, and very interesting story with Millsap. So highly, highly recommend those two contemporary authors as well.
Well, I want to shift and talk about, I don't know if it was your most recent show, but I think it was the last big exhibition that you had with the Lauren Rogers Museum, and it was Homework. I mean, that's a lot. That's amazing. Like, the imagery, and you are probably, thus far, you're definitely the most conceptual artist that I've had on the podcast. But I mean, your amber resin, insects caught my eye. I loved those. And then, going into the searching through your whole plethora of things that you've done, and finding the compression series and finding the books, what amazing work. What brings all of this about? So here's high praise. How do you do it?
That's a question that I ask myself too, right? Because people ask like, oh, what's the motivation? Or you're asked a lot as an artist to write and explain your artwork. And it's so challenging because like, I hope that what I'm trying to express is in the artwork. But it does come from a conceptual spot. Okay. So here's the concept. So like concept idea. Okay. And that's kind of the stuff that gets me steamed up and angry. Like I kind of verbalized earlier in our conversation today, like just like the things that get me so just the things I feel powerless about, I would say, like institutional racism or gerrymandering or the destruction of our only planet through corporate greed. Yay! So, like if I'm thinking about making an artwork, I want it to have some meaning that can connect beyond me. And I think in grad school, and I was doing those performance pieces, I was all like processing a lot of like personal body image and kind of like those struggles as a young woman working in the construction industry who's feeling the impact of sexism in a very real, like concrete way daily. And I think after that, and then when I moved here, I was kind of like, what am I doing? Like, what is my work about? And my work, I think now that I think right now what I think my work is about right now is just about that labor. So as an artist, I'm a laborer. I make art, art is work, work is time, time is art. So that's kind of like a mantra, right? And when I'm approaching a piece, a lot of times I'll like find something in my environment, like that collection. I'll use the industrial amber piece as an example, because you brought that up. I think I'll use that as an example for how this developed. So like I was at an artist residency. I found a dead frog. I thought it was really pretty. And I was working with epoxy. So I kind of stuck it in my sketchbook, like in epoxy. And I was like, ooh, dead frog, so cute. Like I love collecting things, like, you know, that little girl in the woods. That's like that little part of me. Right. And then it kind of like sits and festers. And then I had this amazing opportunity for the show at the Lauren Rogers Museum. I'm so grateful to them. What a cool concept. The curator, Kristen Tordella-Williams, she's the one who invited me after a studio visit like 3 years ago. Right. So this is all like long time. And in the meantime, I was making work like the compression series with cockroaches. I was very interested in the symbolism of cockroaches, and they're really gross. And they made me like react here in the South. They're disgusting. They're huge. And then they're like, get her. And you're like, and I had access to a lot of cockroach carcasses. So it's like, okay, so this is something I have around me, you know, kind of pulling from my environment and like things that I'm reacting to. And then I had this show, and I'm doing research about the timber industry in Mississippi, and specifically in Laurel, because that's what founded the wealth. That was a wealth. That's what founded the collection of the museum. And I was tasked to do a collections intervention show. So collections interventions, I could take anything from the collection and I'm going to put quotes around, do what I wanted. But in museums, there's lots of rules. So right. I kind of had to like... for a good reason, you know, destructive living artists like me like to make a mess, like to do things that are dirty and weird and like maybe challenging to maintaining these pieces and longevity, which is nothing that I'm that interested in, is like having pieces that live for forever. Like, I think I am interested in it, but I'm not. It's like I'm interested in ephemeral, and then I cast iron that will last forever. But I'm interested in destruction as a form of creation. And so all of this is kind of floating around, and I wanted to make one side of the gallery to reference the forest, right? I wanted to make a forest of some kind. And so that's where the 40 stumps piece came from. And then I was like, oh, I have all these bugs. Like I have a collection of bugs. Like, can I do something with these? And I wanted to make some, like, I had an idea. I had an idea to make like a pustule, or like to make amber. And maybe it's because Jurassic Park was one of the only movies we had on VHS as a kid. Like, I love that movie. So like this, like an image that stuck with me as like this imaginative, oh, we can take the DNA and make dinosaurs now, like that geological time. Oh, this is so interesting. And I have all these like bugs. I have all these bugs. I got my bug jar. And my husband helps me. He's always like, oh, there's a fly. I'm actually collecting flies right now. So y'all, if you have any flies, send them to me, not in a creepy envelope. You imagine sort of like a confetti in the envelope, you open it up, like flies.
There's just a bunch of squishy spots down at the bottom.
But anyway, if you see any flies, put them in a jar and send them to me. I want them. But anyway, I had this collection of bugs, and then I had actually bartered for other bugs with somebody during a different project, a harder barter market. And so I had this really big variety of flies, cockroaches, butterflies. I had this dead salamander that I found in my office when I was cleaning it. Wow. And and I was like, they're on their own as carcasses are just like kind of like a crazy lady's etymology. Entomology, that's what etymology is, words, entomology is books. Can I elevate them through process and material? And can I talk about that geological time and critique it with my use of material? So I created these castings and I tinted them so they look like amber. I was interested in resin and epoxy, and I know that it has a natural like yellow. Some of it, like this cheaper or is a specific kind, has that yellow hue, but I really wanted to have that goldeny like amber, like very clearly that it was amber. And like actually the resin that I got was very high quality, the one that I ended up using, and it would have been very clear if I didn't if I didn't tint it with amber pigment. And I encapsulated these bugs in amber, and then had to polish all of that just like it would have been polished if it were amber. That was very time consuming and took way longer than I thought. Oh my God. So again, there's all that labor, my personal labor, and then like what the bugs could represent once they're a piece on the wall in the gallery, kind of seeping from the wall. And I'm thinking of climbing like pine trees and getting that sap on your hands and seeing that sap. The pine trees, the yellow pine trees are what fueled Laurel's founding. You know, this is the natural resource that these carpetbaggers came down, dirty progressive Yankees. They created this really interesting progressive-ish town in Mississippi, created a lot of wealth there. And then when the forest cut out, they went, like, not all of them did, but some of them went to the Pacific Northwest and did the same thing there, right? Taking these natural resources and taking that wealth. But yet it's also the workers who contributed to that. So again, representing that impact on the industry and labor on our environment. And so now those 40 castings are kind of like seeping from the walls of the museum. Then when you think about it, 2020, 2021 terms, they could also represent individuals in our own little pods, our own little bubbles, because of the pandemic. So there's like all this different, like, I think it's a complex thing. I consider myself a conceptual artisan. So I'm not just about making a piece that's like a concept, but I also, because I love the work and I love process and I love making art, I'm a maker. There's also the artisanry part where it's highly crafted, due to like a response to the materials and a response to that concept. So it kind of comes across in that Venn diagram, hopefully.
And it's work that you can sit with for long amounts of time. It's not necessarily it's not soothing work. It's not, and I don't think it's meant to be soothing. You know, you're sitting there and you need to explore these things that are at first very abstract. And then, you know, the longer you sit with it, the more ideas you yourself gather about it, and it develops in its own way and it becomes another piece of art. You know, what I got from it was similar to what you just told me, but was completely different. And cool. That fascinates me. And that's active experience that we need to be providing to everyone. And I think a huge gap in Mississippi and Mississippi's arts the art world did us a disservice a long time ago by telling everybody that they're stupid. And the South doesn't take being told they're stupid very well. And it was, you know, and so they shut out.
Me, I'm stupid.
Yeah. So, you know, it closed off and let it do its thing. But now there's a whole conceptual side of art world, not just the abstract that we were all told we're stupid for, but a conceptual side that's very inviting to figure yourself out, and bridging the gap between Mississippians experiencing that and Mississippi artists feeling comfortable enough to bring that to the surface is what you're doing. You know?
Oh my gosh.
And that's great.
And, you know, I wouldn't be able to do this without my teaching income. So I get a lot of support through my work as a teacher. And then it feeds in. It's part of that. It's like a Venn diagram with like 18 circles. It feeds in to what I'm able to do in my studio practice. And that was another big reason why I wanted to be a professor, not just because I am passionate about making art and want to share that with the next generation, right? The generation coming up. Like, I think it's a little bit of the artist's duty is to not develop these processes and then say, well, it's my special thing. I'm the only one who knows how to do it. Right? Anyone could try to make my work. And I would love to see that, because I would be very interested if you could, like, can you even, I mean, I guess you could, but like, will it look like my work? No, it's just like when you have a classroom of drawing students and they're all drawing the same thing on the stand, none of the drawings look the same because everybody has their own unique perspective. And so what I want to see in Mississippi arts culture is an encouraging, just like what you're talking about, of expressing our ideas, and more than observational artworks, which I think are wonderful and beautiful. And I have many in my home, and I have many friends who work this way, but like, that's not the only way to make art now. And now we don't have to be in New York City in order to be on the, I'll put quotes again around the avant-garde, like you are your own avant-garde, like you are competing against yourself as an artist. Like, how can you challenge yourself to make each piece something unexpected for yourself, but also related to your own personhood, if that makes sense. Yeah. So I agree. Like, I think that's important to cultivate this. And I think MSA, the school, Mississippi School for the Arts, I love working with those students. I get some of the graduates here at Millsaps. I just absolutely adore them. I think having that grouping of creative minds is really part of that. Cause then you feel like, oh, even if I'm not making the same thing as my friend here, we're thinking in the same way, or we want to express ourselves. And that's the commonality that I can have. And then like encourage each other to just like be more creative. And that's something that's so important as a young artist. So you need that encouragement and that support in order to really take those risks, like, and do things that aren't observational.
And taking all the kids that have that interest in building a community in a small space where they get to support each other. They get to help bounce ideas off of each other without fear of rejection or judgment, or, everybody's there to accomplish and to be better and to grow. It's something that is, wow, to be able to start as a child and to grow through that has got to be an amazing experience. What a gift.
And I think Mississippi needs MSA and the MSMS. Like, we need those magnet schools. We need to promote arts education. And I also think that arts education needs to be invested in more throughout people's careers. So I'll get students who come into my classes who are like, oh my God, I love art. I didn't know art was for me. Like, I didn't know that I could express myself, even if it's as a hobby, right? Like, as being a full person in the world, like, it's free, art's for everyone. And you shouldn't feel blocked out of it. And like, I have felt that way, and that sucks. It's like, no, art's for me. Like, it's this museum, I can pay to get in here. Like, or there's museum days that are for free, or like, look at Instagram, art's for everybody. Loves art. Everybody loves it. And they just think when it becomes capital A art, it becomes this big, like, ooh, the art world. Right. But it's there for everyone. So I think MSA is a great part in that in Mississippi. And I was going to say something else about it, but I can't remember. So,
well, I want to shift gears and get to my ulterior motive. So the city, I live in Brookhaven, Mississippi, and it is beautiful. They've renovated downtown. They've restored it, and it's historical and it's gorgeous. And we are looking to bring more public arts into the spaces. And I'm a newbie to that. I have my art studio and I have my paintings and I have friends who are sculptors and muralists and all this stuff. But when it comes down to nuts and bolts, I don't know what I'm doing. And I figured, as long as I don't know what I'm doing, I could invite other people who don't know what they're doing, and we could listen to somebody who might know what they're doing. So I wanted to kind of pick your brain. I mean, you've got you're involved with the Midtown Sculpture Walk, and you're involved with the Harder Barter Market, which is a really cool concept for creatives to collect things and like public art. Yeah.
Art. Yeah. I think public art, again, so art is for everyone. Public art really is for everyone because it's just placed out there in the community. And it's just kind of like, there's the joke in the sculpture, plop and drop, like plop, but like it creates, artists and artwork creates like something happens. There's like this energy that happens, like a space that was formerly just disregarded is then made special. And when our work is out in the community 24/7, it becomes a part of that community fabric, and it can mean that it's accessible at any time to anyone. You don't have to go anywhere. It's just part of your life, and everybody deserves that in their lives. They deserve that cultural enrichment, right? And that it's like part of being a healthy community, I think, is to have art that is available without having to travel or go places and things like that. So I'm on the board of another MSA, not Mississippi School for the Arts, but the Mid-South Sculpture Alliance. I'm the vice president. And on this board, we do a lot of different things, but it's a members-based organization made up mostly of sculptors living primarily in the Southeast. And so we do different events like bring artists in to give lectures to the membership. We do meetups. It's a networking group, and then we provide opportunities like public art exhibitions and indoor exhibitions. So on the board, we're all actively trying to find these opportunities. So with the Midtown Sculpture Walk, Midtown is right across from Millsaps. And I had a long hunger for contemporary public sculpture in Jackson. And I had participated in some different arts events and creating arts events that use Midtown as our host site, and because there's an arts community there, and the residents really appreciate artwork, and that's part of the long-term plan for the neighborhood, is to provide more public artwork. And so I thought, well, I need to kind of combine all of these things, and public art, let's do it. So I wrote some grants in partnership with the Midtown Partners, who's my main pal in this mission. And we got enough money to fund an exhibition of 6 sculptures in Midtown for 18 months. And the primary cost, right, it all comes down to money, because we want to pay sculptors for their work. Right. Oh my God, pay artists, right, Derek? You know this. You want to get paid. You work.
It is the mission for everything I do. And every time somebody has tried to involve me in something, they're like, "Oh, just get some musicians." I was like, "Okay, how much do you want to pay them?" Or just get some artists. Okay, well, what's the base fee that they're showing up for?
Yeah. Like, what are you going to pay them for their time? Exposure is not enough. And I show my work a lot, and I don't get paid for it. And so where I primarily can find consistent funding is for public artwork. And so it does make a huge impact in terms of my income, even though, again, I'm receiving a paycheck from Millsnaps for doing a lot of work there. But the public art in terms of my art practice is the most profitable area of my art practice, because I think I don't focus on sales on my own work. I don't have enough time to focus on sales. I don't have the time to market myself. That's a whole job that I already had to do, as you know, I had to do my website, and then I had to do this and I had to do that. And I need to work on my projects, and I need to kind of constantly get these things in the pipeline. It takes a lot of time to apply for all this stuff. All that time I'm not spending marketing my artwork, because that's just the thing that I'm choosing to maybe at some point in the future. Yeah.
When you retire, you'll be able to be a full-time artist.
Whenever that is. I mean, I don't think, I won't be a professional professor, right, when I retire, but I always that's my goal in my health, is to maintain my health and longevity so I can be working throughout my entire life on my artwork. But anyway, so the primary important thing you need to know about public sculpture and public murals, get some money to pay artists. And because the other element of this is not just a usual thing. I can buy a canvas at Joann Fabrics for an affordable price. I can get my paints, and I can make a lot of paintings for an indoor exhibition. I'm using painting as an example, but we know that art costs money, paintings cost money, labor. Okay.
But it's on the cheaper scale. Your sculpture is on the that's a lot of money.
It just takes that you have to have the additional infrastructure as a sculptor, to have the welding equipment, to have access to a foundry, to pay for the sand that makes the mold of your pattern, all of the materials that you need to make that pattern. I could go on about how much that costs, plus my education, which cost me money, right? All of that. And all that led to, people are like, "Oh, that's so much." But my education is why I can do it in the time that I can do it. My experience is why I can do it in the time that I can do it. And I'm paying for all this overhead that you think is just magically doesn't have anything to do in the production of art, but it does. So I'm saying you, not you, Derek, but not your listeners, but the jokers, my kid could do that. It's no, okay, let's see your kid do it.
Yeah, man.
Did anybody want to pay for that? I don't know. But anyway, I'm digressing. I got a little trigger there. With public art, you also have to think about longevity. So when I'm making a piece for the public sphere, I want to make sure it can live up to the, we're about to get tornado warnings today in Mississippi. The wind, the incredible forceful rain, the baking sun. Yeah. You need to use for murals, you need to use a UV resistant paint that you need to coat your murals with that so they don't fade in a year. And that's incredible. That's another layer, right, that you have to be able to think about. I have to factor in transportation costs, thinking about sculpture or even murals when you transport it to install it. That's a cost. And in terms of facilitating this, you need to factor in a licensed installer. Right? You don't want to have somebody who's not licensed in case something happens installing this work, because then you will get sued.
Right.
We live in a litigious society. Yay. Yeah. And then when I'm designing these pieces, I also want to make sure that people are going to be dumb. They're going to act dumb. I need to make sure that they can stand up to the dumb. And This includes kids and adults and mostly people under the influence. I would say most of the time it's because somebody's under the influence and then they're like, oh, and they, I'm making some motions here for those of you listening at home. And so all that stuff factors into how you design and execute this piece. Plus, then you have to insure it when it's in the public sphere because of that dumb. And you know, for the Midtown Sculpture Walk, all of the pieces had to be placed in a location that was within 100 yards of a Midtown Partners building in order for it to be umbrellaed into their insurance policy. So there's all these things that you don't see that are happening behind the scenes. Okay. We had to do a call for the artists, right? And we did it through the MSA, Mid-South Sculpture Alliance, to be clear, membership. Okay. And a lot of our members make public art. Great. We got 40 applicants. Then we had to adjudicate them. And I made sure to include, I wasn't the adjudicator. I wasn't the sole one. It was me, Tanja Murphy, and Dr. Chrissy Hendricks. So I was one of three. And I even, in fact, when we went into the adjudication, I was like, I don't want to be too influential because, you know, as the art expert, quote unquote, in the room, I don't want to be too dominant because like, this is not to serve me alone, right? Like if it were me alone, I would have chosen totally different pieces. Actually, I wanted to make sure that they would have some kind of connection and like good thinking about the placement. Like Tanja and Chrissy were really knowledgeable about what pieces might look good in what location and what might connect with the residents or what might be a better piece for the residents. I'm thinking about this piece by Susie Hendricks, who's a Memphis-based sculptor. It's called Rococo Throne Nouveau, and people can sit on it, and it's placed outside the Prosperity Center. So you get to be your own, you know, prosperous, you are enthroned, you know? So like, yeah, that was a perfect piece for that spot. And yeah, and we made, it's like a very interesting, diverse selection of sculptures that none of them are of this, a similar description or look, right? Because it's just like a variety and they're placed all around you. The other element like that you need to think about when you're planning these, what are you attaching these sculptures to? Is it on city land? Because that I love you, Jackson, did not want to open that can of worms. So we placed everything on Midtown Partners land and nothing on a sidewalk because there's a lot of egress issues. You have to really be considerate of these things. And you need to make sure that they're secured or able to be secured to something, not just placed there, either buried with footings, secured to a cement base, like a cast pad, or steel plate. Those are like the most common. So I saw you had a little inkling. You already have this solution for this challenge.
No, that was one of my biggest questions. I was like, okay, so we're going through the process and we're thinking about money. And one of the first things that I was thinking about was not the artist side of it. It was like, okay, so we're going to call them. We know we're going to call them. What do we put these things on? They need to be bolted. They need to be, you know, so is that something that you do per sculpture that you might have coming in, or do you have any certain set ones that are out all the time and you pick the sculpture because it will attach? Or
yeah, I mean, part of the selection process for your group will have to be like, where are they going? Like, where are the potential sites? And there were some pieces that we didn't accept because they had maybe multiple parts to them and we didn't have a spot for them. So, but you may be like, oh, a field and they're buried and like, perfect. That's perfect for this. So you have to be really clear in your call as to what kind of pieces you're looking for, because there are, you know, because it's a common thing, a lot of sculptors will have an ability to make a piece. They'll have a lot of pieces that will fit onto a 4-foot by 4-foot concrete pad. That's like a common size. For the Mid-South Sculpture Alliance, we do have we have some concrete pads that are being kind of like floated around at different exhibitions. The one in Midtown, my colleague, Isaac Duncan, who's this amazing sculptor who's based out of Chattanooga, came down. He has his own business and he is licensed and insured as a installation expert. So he came down, he stayed with us. This is the last person I had stay at my house at the beginning of the pandemic.
Oh,
Isaac. And we went through with the installation. This was on March 15th of last year. Like, wow. Barely threaded the needle on that one, Derek. I have to tell you, and I'm so glad because it's been up this whole year and anybody can go see it. It's a totally safe activity. We had, besides the fact that we didn't really have very many events we were able to do a lot of digital promotion of the show. We did a walking tour and things like that. The AutoCast app reached out to me, and now there's an audio guide for this. Anybody listening can download it and find audio descriptions of these pieces that were given about by the artists themselves in their artist's own voice. And what was I going to say about the installation? What were we talking about? Oh, the pads. So he brought down 6 steel pieces of steel. Oh my God, steel sheets. That were 1/2 inch. So they're very thick and heavy, and it's you can't move them without a forklift, really. And so some of the pieces were welded to the steel plates. And so, like, if you look at the photos of the sculpture walk on the Mid-South SculptureAlliance.org website, you can see like Zorro, which is outside the Montessori Center, that's been welded to a steel base. And then that piece was actually purchased in honor of a retiring board member of the Midtown Partners. And so now it's going to be permanently next to the Montessori Center. And it's so cute, Derek. It's the cutest piece by Jeffy Brewer. He's an artist out of Nacogdoches, Texas. And so then I'm bringing artists into Jackson. I'm bringing artwork into Midtown. And now that artwork is going to be there forever. And it's so, oh my God, it's so cute. And it's nice to all these little kids and they get to see it. So it's like, you know, when you're a kid and you have that, like, oh, the fox is going to be part of their imaginations. It's so cool. But anyway, yeah, so we had, and then he took some of them back with him because there were 3 sites that had concrete. And I don't think that Susie Hendrick's piece needed a base. So it depends on the sculptures. It depends on the site. So I would scout, like, if I'm partnering with a city government, A, what is their insurance? B, where am I going to be allowed to do this? So I'm not preventing egress. You know, ADA is so important. We never want to block people from accessing anything. We always want to, crucial. And then where will it fit in with the environment around it? Like, or stand out? Where is a good setting for this piece? So those are all really important things when you're thinking about adjudicating public sculpture.
Absolutely. Okay, so I want to jump back for just a second for insurance. You had mentioned insurance. I'm like, oh, yay, art. But no, wait, insurance. Okay. Yeah. So do sculptors have, or do artists have insurance for their pieces that are going out? Or is that that's the city or the organization that is hosting the sculptures to make sure? I'm sure it's both, right?
Yeah.
So,
I mean, I personally was concerned about this when I started making public art. So I reached out to my insurance guy and he upped my coverage in that sense. I think I should double check on that, Derek. In terms of insuring your pieces, artists are usually responsible for insuring the pieces during delivery and then after they pick them up. And then once you arrive on that site, the insurance is then transferred to the host. And it is highly unusual for artists to insure their work when they're in an exhibition. That's part of the duty of the host.
Right.
Yeah. You got to cover that. And like, fortunately, Midtown Partners, they own a lot of property in Midtown. And so they already had a pretty expansive insurance contract. And so it didn't cost any extra money for these pieces to be covered. We just had to list them as, you know, like do some kind of like in the contract and like do some kind of like listing of the pieces as being under the purview, you know, like something like that. So it depends on who your partner is. It depends on the site. Every piece should be insured from the moment it arrives to the moment it leaves for the artist benefit. Right. So we don't get sued if somebody does a dumb, and then for your benefit. So you don't get sued if somebody does a dumb.
Absolutely.
And then if the piece breaks because somebody does a dumb, it's covered under the insurance policy.
And that's what I'm nerve-wracked about. I'm like, yeah, let's bring public art. And then I just see like a little kid swinging around and around. And their parents are like pushing them to make them go faster. And
Yeah. I mean, we design our pieces to hold up to that. But it's hard, you know, if I'm thinking of a really sad example. My friend ran a sculpture exhibition in Scranton, and some, like, I don't even know how they did this. This is a series of like cast. It was a sphere made out of parts that were cast iron, and they had pushed it off the base somehow, and then rolled it down a hill and into a stream. So the piece was damaged really pretty badly, actually. And I was just heartbroken because it's just so devastating. It only takes one crappy person or a group of under the influence crappy people to just like crap all over all that hard work that everybody did in the community, even if it's appreciated and supported by the vast majority of the people who live there. All it takes is one stupid dummy with a spray paint can, just who doesn't understand the amount of labor that it goes into producing this kind of work. And, like lucky them, they're so privileged. They don't understand how much time and energy it takes to fund and execute and create these works. So yeah, we need more arts education, right, Derek? But
I was going to ask, is that, I mean, have you been able to kind of educate the public around not doing that? Have you seen, like, the longer you have the art there in public, do you see less of that happening?
I'm lucky so far, knock on wood. I'm lucky so far. Nothing has happened in Midtown. I kind of think like they're well behaved, they're respectful of artwork, right? I think it depends on the community, but again, it could be just one person. Yeah. And that one person hasn't behaved poorly yet. So far I've been lucky. I can't let those dum-dums prevent me from continuing to put public art out there, because that's just part and parcel of being involved in public artworks. It can be really, really sad and upsetting and frustrating. I've had pieces of my own destroyed and destructed, and it's a learning experience. Like, how can I prevent this from happening again? And like, maybe my design was too inviting, and maybe it needs to be stronger and made out of a different material. This is when I was an undergrad. And also, yeah, arts education. I don't know. I think by doing these public art things, hopefully through that, people have more respect for arts and see that art is for them. It's not just for like privileged people over here. It's for everybody in that community to enjoy. And then they have more respect for the artworks themselves. I don't totally know though, Derek. I don't wish I could be in the head of some dum-dum, but I've made dumb decisions before. Mm-hmm. So I've been there where I've done stupid things that I regret, and like, why that impact of my actions. It's like, oh, I wish I didn't do that. I wish I didn't do that. So I have empathy, but I don't have necessarily forgiveness. No forgiveness. No, I'm just joking. I think like ideally there would be a lot more respect in our culture for artists and a lot more funding. So anytime anybody like yourself says, yeah, let's do public art, I'm going to take on this organizational aspect, which is incredibly challenging. That's a great thing. So the other thing I'm going to add here is that you're not alone, Derek. So if you want to partner with the Mid-South Sculpture Alliance and you have funding, hey, baby, we'll work with you.
I would love that. Let me get funding. Let me figure out how the funding's going to work. But yes, I definitely would love that. I mean, that's
we have a great network. Yeah, we have a great network. We have a lot of artists who have sculptures, and we'll travel. So it is part of my my privilege, my work as a board member to invite and encourage public art. So anybody listening, midsouthsculpturealliance.org. Yeah.
I was just going to ask you that. Where all can people find you? So run down socials or websites or anything that you would want people to come and check you out at.
So I have a really unique name. What's up? Thanks, Mom. And she actually named my first two siblings. I'm the baby of four. My first two siblings are just Williams. Last name is my dad's name. And then she had some kind of come to Jesus moment about feminism and was like, I'm going to give my last two children my last name. So I have a hyphenated last name. So if you want to follow me or find me on the internet, it's actually pretty easy. If you look up my name, which is Derek is probably going to put it in the notes, I would assume. I'm on Instagram. I have a website. It's my name on both of them. And then for Mid-South Sculpture Alliance, you just look up midsouthsculpture.org, or on Instagram and on Facebook, follow our accounts, Mid-South Sculpture Alliance. You'll find us. And we welcome you. We welcome people who are not sculptors to become members. If you're arts appreciators, you can be a member. If you want to be tuned into what's happening, the membership is pretty affordable. I think it's just at $50 for a regular member. So I I know that it's money. I'm not like unwise to that fact, but I don't think it's so much money that it's preventative from joining, unlike a lot of professional organizations.
I completely agree. So to wrap this up, I don't want to take up much more of your time because I could talk about this stuff all day long. And there's 1,000 questions that I've not even thought to ask yet that are going to come and slap me in the face as I continue this.
Like contracts, Derek. Yeah.
There's another 45-minute podcast on contracts.
Oh my God. We get a lawyer to come in to MSA conferences and she'll talk about contracts. And I need to go the next time he comes because I need to brush her up on some contract law and then also copyright and then what to do what to do. Cause like as an artist, you create so much artwork. Like I see behind you of all those beautiful paintings, like what's going to happen to them, right? Like when we're not at that point, hopefully we're not even close, but when you get to that point, like what do you do with all your artwork? Like who's in charge of taking care of it? I don't know. Like I need to go to that conference panel. Anyway, me wrapping up every time.
For me, every time I get a new friend or somebody that comes in and they're just all about my art and they're like, oh, this one and that one and this one and that one. And I was like, okay, so you could possibly end up with all of this if I die just because you appreciate it and we'll probably figure out something to do with it.
Or like a library. I don't know, like what, although at Millsaps, we kind of get approached about people's collections. We have nowhere, we're not really properly equipped to take on and there's no archivist in our department. The pieces I can't take on in that terms. Like we don't really have that capabilities at small college. Very grateful for you thinking of us, but like it's almost, although I shouldn't say this, hey, big wigs. But I mean,
it's in your will.
Where would we put it? And who would watch out? We're not a museum. So like, I think like an institution that already has a collection, right? I don't know. We're getting off sidetracked. Like
I said, more practice. Yeah. For anybody that's coming up behind and that might be going into wanting to do sculpture or performance art or wanting to just explore, just be an artist, what would be some advice that you would give to them? And then I'll let you go.
Oh, Eric, this has been such a fun conversation. I'm so grateful to you for reaching out to me. And now that we're connected, I hope you know that you can reach out again. And I welcome our new friendship. Yay! In terms of artists coming up, I don't know. It depends on what stage you're in. If you're in high school, keep making things. Don't stop. And keep making, keep working. And I would encourage people to get a degree in art because it clearly had an impact on my life and helped me get to where I am right now. And I would be nowhere without my degrees in the sense of my education has given me so much, but my education didn't stop when I left school. And I know I joke that I've never left school because I'm a teacher, but I think that your education, you're responsible for your own education. And even when you're in school, you're responsible for taking as much as you can out of your education that you are paying a lot of money for and that you are investing in yourself. Okay. It is an act. Learning is action. Learning is an action. It's not just passive. You have to be active to learn and to take the most out of your education. So be an active student. Look at John Cage's Rules for Students and Teachers. Love him. And if you're doing weird things and you feel nervous about them, find the people who support you and start creating your support system early. Don't be friends with judgers or haters because they suck and they'll suck all of your energy and make you feel less than. Don't hang out with those people. Hang out with people who love the things that you're doing, who love your creativity, love your unique energy, and really surround yourself with people who are positive about that because otherwise you just, it sucks so much out of you to constantly be defending yourself about your creativity and don't give the haters that energy. And what else would I say? Yeah. Constantly seek out new opportunities. They're not going to find you. No one's going to find you. You're not going to be found. I hate to be like a meanie about this. You will not be discovered. Okay. You have to discover yourself and you have to seek out opportunities like grants, like exhibitions. You need to actively apply for these things. You need to put your name in the hat Otherwise, your name will never be drawn from that hat. Discovery, like look at Lizzo. She's always joking about how, oh yeah, I was an overnight sensation that took 9 years to make. Okay. Love you, Lizzo. Inspiration. Okay. Be like Lizzo, work your ass off. I love her. Anyway, work your ass off, don't burn bridges, make connections. The people who are your teachers are your greatest gateways into your next like professional network. Join professional networks like Mid-South Sculpture Alliance, or wherever you end up, there's going to be a regional arts council. Get in with them, find your people, hang on to them, because they're going to help you with these opportunities. I'm thinking about other sculptors in Mississippi, like Phoenix Savage or Jen Torres. Like those are people that help me not miss things. And we're always accountable for each other. Oh, did you apply for this? Did you do that? Did you hear back from this? We're not in competition with each other. We don't see each other that way. We're each other's best supports. Okay. So help each other. Don't pull other people down. You help each other by lifting each other up. Okay. So that's my biggest advice for people who are coming up.
Thank you so much, Kristen, for being with us. Thank you, everyone, for listening. Join us again next week for another podcast and another artist. Until then.